Good question. Are we jeopardizing the future by hearing about it?
Yeah, repeat the question.
Okay, yes. She asked me, are we jeopardizing the future by knowing about it, by reporting it, by speaking about it? And I had that concern. Yes, I did. I've had every concern that anyone in this room, I believe, can have tonight. I've been through the gamut of concerns, and I expressed them in the book. In fact, my role has often been to challenge these messages that I get. And I think the first 5 or 6 chapters, I was really saying, I don't know if I'm going to write this book. This is, I don't know if I can accept what you're saying. And yet they kept coming back with answers that made me say, okay, I can accept that. And to answer this concern, they said to me that the more information you can have, the better. To know about it is to create it. So the more we know about our own awakening, the more we can make it happen. The more we know about how transparent time is, the more we can enter timelessness and formlessness. And that's exactly how they told me they invented their means of getting back here to travel in time, basically. They basically said they transpose themselves. They move time itself and transpose it, their time on us, in order to communicate. All right, so that's the science fiction part of this. And let me say, this book is science fiction in some ways. It's also allegory in other ways. And in a third way, I believe it's very deeply spiritual, and it connects with me on a lot of levels. So, and I found that it does connect with a lot of other people that way too. You and then you, okay? Yep.
Just what you were saying, how we're going to change. I have a feeling that we're not going to put as much pressure on the earth, that our needs aren't going to be so physical as they're going to be more mental, and we won't need on demand as much as we do now. Like we have oil constraints or gas or food or water. I think as a species we're going to move beyond our demands for the physical and move more into the mental.
The biggest change, they told me, was that their egos have gone way down. They have only minimal ego that helps them get through childhood and adolescence, perhaps, but they have gone way up on the appreciation scale. They said really the major difference between their species and ours is appreciation. It comes down to one word. They know how to truly, continuously appreciate, which puts them in the now, in the moment.
Do you believe that the changes we're seeing now in our children, like the indigo children, ADD, autism, that somehow is like a stepping stone towards this new species? Is that do you view it that way?
How do you feel about that? Are the new indigo children, ADD, other phenomena that we see in children, is that leading to this? Well, what do you think? Yes, you do.
Yeah, I didn't have any problem with any of the concepts in the book. In fact, I can embrace most of them. And as I was reading it, I felt that the examples given by O were examples that were given in the Bible. In fact, they quotes many times from the Bible. And the fact of not having egoless people prior to 500, I see examples in Jesus and Buddha. In fact, if you look at Paul, before his transition, he became egoless after his transition. And there's many, many examples in the Bible of this change, especially in the parables.
Okay.
I see it. It's been happening.
Okay.
I see it's been happening for a while.
Have you heard what he said?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
There have been children on television, even Johnny Carson going way back have had children. Recently, David Letterman had some, that they're maybe 6 and 7 years old. Some of them are completing college, and all of them are very altruistic. They want to end disease. They want peace on earth. There are quite a few of them, and I was an educator in elementary school, and I could see the progression of the children as they came through. A lot of them, typical of the Aquarian energy coming in, were very independent, and we challenged the teachers quite a bit. So it's a whole new way coming in. And Teilhard de Chardin spoke about that. Are you familiar with
The
him?
noosphere, right?
Yeah, about that the evolution coming is in consciousness and not in the physical form.
Right. Did everyone hear that? Yes.
What you said at the end when you were talking about the Niels, who was it that you spoke about? The person that you said you were saying about the suspension,
Yes.
livers.
Yes.
Okay. At the end, when you talked about suspension, I believe that's where we're going. We throw around this word oneness, and that's all nice, but the truth of it is, how are you going to be oneness and yet have our individuality? And how are you going to work as a group? Not to become a beehive, but to work in tandem, because that's going to be where we're going to go.
Yeah.
The work, the cabal, the Bilderbergers, and all of this. We have to work as a group, and to have that suspension, to have the idea, and to be able to put it out there and suspend it, and to arrest ego, so that it's good for the group if the group wants to use it, and if the group doesn't want to use it, you don't go into a big tailspin ego-wise. So I think that's going to be a big aspect of the ego and how we're going to work together in the future.
Right. Can you ask another question? Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to know, I still want to know about the book. I want
Okay.
to know what your experience was and what is the book about?
Okay. You're going to make me do this. No, I owe it to you. I owe it to you. You're right. See, I don't really always know what the book is about because I didn't really make it up. It just came and I wrote it down. So I consider myself a scribe and a translator often, more than anything else.
Sort of automatic writing?
Oh, well, it's not quite that. I mean, I certainly participate in it, and I revise it, and I edit it, and I have friends who help me do those tasks. But let me try to answer your question honestly. The first book is a series of letters describing the changes in the species. There's one chapter, I think, that describes what happens immediately after we start waking up. It's viral. They say it's a viral effect that, like a virus, where our genetics change very rapidly. But people don't necessarily know that that's happening. But the world calms down. After this period of, let's say, 2012, this rush of energy we're feeling this year, I'm sure many of you feel it, we calm down. This is the peak period. And people begin to change genetically, and change spiritually, and they change their species. The need for a new species is basically because the old species was no longer, in the Darwinian sense, was no longer fit to survive. We needed a new species on this planet because if the ego continues, it will destroy the planet, we'll destroy ourselves. And so it's no longer fit to survive if it's going to destroy itself and the rest of the planet, just in pure evolutionary Darwinian terms. I know a lot of people are arguing with Darwin these days, but in just the pure sense of survival, we needed a new species. That's what they say. So there's a whole series of letters describing the events of our passage, and then describing, I start asking questions about how does the government work, and how are nations composed, and what about religions, what about morality, etc. And I get answers, and so those answers are in the book. Morality, for instance. The chapter, it's very questionable to me about a lot of the things that came back, but I have to say it does make sense that morality is just a set of rules that we make up. That's what I was told by them. It's not anything written by God or in stone. So we do the best we can. While we've had egos, morality has been something that we needed. We needed powerful, strong morality to keep our egos collectively under control. But if the ego begins to diminish or disappear, you no longer need morality. You just know how to behave properly. It's just natural in you at that point. Because the ego is about separation. That's the biggest thing the ego does. It separates us from one another. And then we have the archetype of, you mentioned individuality. Individual actually means undivided. It's an archetype. This is something that O told me, that it's an archetype. Individuality is an archetype of oneness. Individual beings, we're representing that oneness in our incarnate forms. Little do we know.
That is beautiful.
So then, and then I'll hear something like the morality thing, and I say, well, just this isn't going to fly. I mean, people are really going to hate this chapter. You sure you want to have this in the book?
It makes a lot of sense to me.
So I argue a lot with them, and they love it. They don't feel like it's stepping on their toes, because they don't have ego reactions, and so they do model. There's a lot of modeling in the book. And then by the end of the book, it starts becoming an adventure story. And the book 2 is more of an adventure story, and book 3 is even more. So book 1 starts off as kind of a lecture, letters telling me what's happening. Book 2 is much more about opening things up and building portals, building avenues into the new universe. That they use that metaphor. And to me, the critical thing about book 2 is, or the critical teaching, is that we can be there now, simply in our imaginations. We all have egoless moments. We all have transcendent moments. Whether we have awakened completely or not, we have those awakened moments. And when we have those moments, we can project ourselves into that new world, and we can be there right now, because it is now. And they call that a portal. They call that building a portal, projecting yourself into that awakened state whenever you can. And of course, we come back and we have our egos, and I have my ego. And so we're back in this world when we do that. But we can live in both worlds. We can have one foot in each world. And the more we can see that in ourselves, the more we are transitioning. We're not stuck here.
I'm fascinated. I think you're fascinating. Were you channeling before book 1? And in all your books, do they talk to you about any concept of God?
Yeah, they do. And I don't call it channeling. Channeling to me is when you just speak or write and you don't edit. As soon as you start editing, to me, that's not channeling. So I say that it's the muses. The muses guide me, and then I transcribe, I translate, I go back and I look at it and say, oh, that's not quite what they meant. So, and I'm a French speaker, and I study French a lot, so I'm very familiar with translating things and not getting it right sometimes, often. So that's the same way I wrote the book. I don't always get it right.
So who are they that you speak about?
They are the people who, all right, so O was the first one that contacted me. And then she introduced me to an old man who didn't have a name either. And I started calling him Om, O-M. And then another character, O's mentor, an older woman who wears black, so her name is Black, B. And those are the 3 main characters, but as the books unfold, the other characters enter.
So there are non-physical beings.
Well, they're physical.
They are physical.
Yeah. But they have the ability to use sub-dimensions. So they're much freer, and they're much more plugged into the formless than we are. Yes.
Like, are they more translucent? Are they less dense?
No, they're a transition species. Some people think of these future species as being like that, transparent and lighter, and there are species. There's a species called Homo angelicus, which is the next evolution beyond the species that we call vigilans, Homo vigilatus, in 500, and that species goes on into the future a long time, but then gradually some members of that species go into the Homo angelicus, and we call those angelins. Maybe I'm making up these words. In fact, O told me at one point in book 2 that they don't call themselves vigilans. They don't use words to describe themselves, but they made that word up for the books. So I call that new species Homo vigilatus. A lot other people have coined other terms. I think who was it? Teilhard de Chardin had a term for them. Homo noetica.
I know the term you're referring to.
Noetus, that's it. Yeah. So there have been a lot of names tried, attempted. Yes.
Did they wear the same colors all the time? Always wore orange?
Yes, she wears different clothes at different times, but they're always orange. Different shades sometimes, but yeah.
Green?
Yeah, each person it resonates. I haven't actually asked that question. The question is, do they always wear the same colors? But my experience has been that. But I don't think that's hard and fast. They could probably change colors if they wanted to. I just, I don't get too particular about that.
Do the colors have something to do with the vibration of the...
Yes, the colors do have something to do with their energy. Absolutely. Yes.
I just have a quick question. If it's a gradual change that's taken place, and they're new species, how do they know this is year 0? Like, how do they know this is the year everything started?
They looked back and they traced the changes in.
So, in other words, we're going to go on 2013, 2014, and then one day someone's going to say, oh, 2012 was year 0.
Yeah. Yeah. Eventually that will happen. I never asked that specific question, but I think that's the way it is. I think that at some point, 20, 30, 50 years from now, everyone comes to a consensus. Everyone on the planet realizes, wait, we've changed. And they measure it. Eventually they do measure genetically the change. They don't do it. She told me they didn't do it within the first 20 years or so. But what do I know? I mean, that's what she said. That's what I wrote down and translated, and so I'm going to stick with that. So